There's a name I never learned. That's what I keep coming back to. After everything. After 86 years of living and 53 years of marriage and 11 years of widowhood. There's a name I never learned. And I'm not sure anymore whether that was strength or cowardice. My name is Walter. I'm 86 years old. And I'm going to tell you something I have never said to another person in my entire life. Not to my children, not to my brother, not to the priest I saw for a few months in the early 1970s when things were difficult and I needed somewhere to put things. Not even to her, not directly, not in words.
Her name was Margaret, my wife. We were married in 1967. She died in 2013. And somewhere in the middle of our marriage, in the early years when we were still finding out who we were to each other, I became aware that there was someone else. I never asked who. That's the thing I've lived with. Not the fact of it. The not asking. We married young. I was 24. She was 22. We met at a dance in the church hall. She was wearing a blue dress. She was laughing at something her friend had said, and she had a way of laughing that used her whole face. I noticed her immediately. We courted for about a year. Nothing dramatic. Sunday walks, Saturday evenings at the cinema, dinners with each other's families. She was warm and direct, and she said what she thought without cruelty. I admired that about her. I still do. We married in June of 1967, on a day that was warmer than expected. I remember standing at the altar, watching her walk toward me, and feeling, very simply, that everything was going to be all right. I believed that for about 4 years. Then something changed. I don't know how to describe it, except as a shift in temperature. Not sudden, gradual. Like a room that cools so slowly you don't notice until you realize you're cold. She became distracted. Not unhappy exactly, just elsewhere, in her own thoughts in a way she hadn't been before. She'd come home from work and seemed to need a few minutes to arrive, to come back from wherever she'd been in her head. I noticed, but I said nothing. I told myself it was tiredness, that the first years of marriage were an adjustment, that everyone went through periods like this. But it went on for months. And then there was an evening. It was a Tuesday in autumn, 1971. I remember because the clocks had just changed, and it was dark earlier than expected when I came home. I came in through the back door. She didn't hear me come in. She was standing in the kitchen with her back to me. She had the telephone receiver pressed to her chest, not speaking into it, just holding it against her. Her eyes were closed. I stood in the doorway, and I watched her for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she opened her eyes and saw me. She put the receiver down quickly, said she'd been on the phone with her sister, said her sister was having a difficult time. I said, "Is everything all right?" She said, "Yes. Everything's fine." And she turned to the stove and started on dinner. I sat down at the kitchen table. and I said nothing else. I knew, in the way you know things you don't want to know, that it hadn't been her sister. I knew from the way she'd been holding the receiver, from the closed eyes, from something in the quality of the silence when I walked in. I knew. And I made a decision in that kitchen, sitting at that table, while she stood at the stove with her back to me. I decided not to know.
I want to try to explain that decision, because I've spent 50 years trying to explain it to myself. It wasn't weakness exactly, or maybe it was. I'm not sure anymore that I know the difference. Part of it was fear, simply that. I was 26 years old. We had a small house and a life we were just beginning, and I was afraid that asking the question would give the answer somewhere to live, that naming it would make it real in a way I couldn't take back. Part of it was pride. I didn't want to be the man standing in his own kitchen asking his wife who she'd been on the phone with. And part of it, the part I've thought about most, was something else. I think I believed that if I didn't ask, she could still choose. That if I left it unnamed and unconfronted, she had room to come back, to decide on her own that whatever it was wasn't worth what we were building together. And she did come back. Over the following months, the temperature in the room slowly returned to normal. The distraction faded. She was present again, warm again. The woman I married came back to our kitchen and our Sunday mornings and our ordinary life. And I never said a word. Not then, not ever. I told myself it was over, and that was what mattered. I told myself that for 50 years. We had a good marriage after that. I mean that without irony. We had 4 children. We built a home. We grew into each other the way people do over decades, when they choose each other every day without drama. She was a wonderful mother. She was funny and patient, and she remembered everything about everyone she loved. Birthdays, preferences, the small details of people's lives that most people let slip. I loved her, fully and without reservation for most of our life together. But the kitchen in 1971 was always there. Not loudly, not every day, but it was there the way a piece of furniture is there in a room. You stop seeing it, but you're always navigating around it. There were moments over the years, small things that would bring it back. Once, in the mid-1980s, we ran into a man at a neighbor's gathering. I didn't know him. She introduced him as someone she'd worked with years ago, before the children. She was composed, pleasant, nothing unusual in how she spoke to him. But I watched her face, and there was something, a moment, a quality of careful control that was itself a kind of evidence. It passed in seconds. I said nothing. We drove home, put the children to bed, watched the end of something on television. I never asked.
She got older. We both did. The children grew and left. The house got quieter. We had the kind of later years that people describe as peaceful, and I think they genuinely were. We traveled a little. We had grandchildren. We sat on the back porch on summer evenings and talked about nothing important. She was sick for the last 2 years of her life, her heart, slowly and then quickly. In those last months, we talked more honestly than we ever had, about the children, about our own childhoods, about things we'd always meant to say. There were evenings when I'd sit beside her bed and she'd hold my hand and we'd just be there together in a way that felt complete. And I would think, now is when I ask. Not to accuse, not to reopen anything, just to finally know, to let it be real between us before there was no time left. And I never did. Every evening I'd sit there with the question somewhere in my chest, and every evening I'd leave without asking it. Because what would I have done with the answer? That's what I always came back to. What would I have done with the answer at 30 years, at 50 years, at the end? I still don't know. She died on a Wednesday morning in March. I was holding her hand, and in the hours after, sitting in that room with the nurses coming and going and the particular silence of a house after someone leaves it permanently, I sat with everything I'd never asked. The name I never learned, the phone call in the kitchen in 1971, the man at the neighbor's party, the closed eyes pressing the receiver to her chest, all of it. I'm 86 years old, and I've come to understand something I couldn't have understood at 26 or 36 or even 60. The not asking wasn't only about fear or pride or giving her room to choose. Some of it was love, not the clean kind that people talk about, the complicated kind, the kind that looks at someone and decides that the truth of who they are right now matters more than the truth of what they did then. I chose her again and again without ever making her know I was choosing. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe she deserved to know what I knew and what I'd decided. Maybe she carried her own silence all those years, not knowing that I was carrying mine right beside it. I think about that sometimes. Two people in the same marriage carrying the same secret from different sides, never once putting it on the table between them, not because they couldn't, but because some part of both of them understood that the life they had was worth more than the conversation they were afraid to have. I don't know if that's wisdom or damage. After 86 years, I genuinely don't know. But her name was Margaret, and I loved her. And there's a name I never learned, and I think I made my peace with that a long time ago. I just needed to say it out loud, even here, even now, even to no one in particular. It needed to exist somewhere outside of me before I run out of time to let it. If you stayed with me through all of this, thank you. I don't know what you're sitting with, but if there's something in your own life that has never been said out loud, maybe just let it exist somewhere, even in a quiet room, even alone. Sometimes that's enough. That's all I have.